Good morning. What are you wondering about right now? Are you wondering, when am I going to get something to eat? Or maybe you're wondering, what time are my friends coming over to play with me? Or when is it going to be my turn? You know, we all know when some things are going to happen, but there are some things we just don't know. And the same was true with Joseph. Remember, Joseph was in prison? And he was in prison with the cupbearer and the baker, and they each had a dream one night. And God helped Joseph to interpret those dreams. And he had said to the cupbearer, when the Pharaoh restores you to your position, could you please remember me to the Pharaoh? Because I'm here in prison and I haven't done anything wrong. And so he thought that the cupbearer would remember, and then it would be time for him to get out of prison. But that's not what happened, because he forgot about Joseph. But more importantly, it wasn't God's time. And so Joseph stayed in prison for 2 more years. Now, after 2 years had passed, the Pharaoh one night had 2 very troubling dreams. And when he woke up, he called all of his wise men to him. He called all of his magicians. He told them the dreams, but they just couldn't figure it out. They said, well, we just don't know. And then the cupbearer remembered Joseph. He said, I had forgotten. A couple of years ago, when you were angry with the baker and myself, you had us imprisoned, and there was a Hebrew slave called Joseph. He was in the prison too, and one night we each had a dream, and he told us the meaning of the dreams. They came true just like he said. So the Pharaoh wasted no time and called Joseph up. Joseph got ready and came before the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh said, I've had dreams. They're troubling dreams, and I've been told that you can interpret dreams. And Joseph said, it's not me that interprets dreams, it's God. But God will help me understand your dreams if you tell me. So the Pharaoh said, I will. He said, what I dreamt was that 7 very fat and healthy cows came up out of the Nile River and began to eat the grass along the edge. But just then, 7 very thin and sick and scrawny cows came up behind them, and they ate up the 7 healthy fat cows. But you know, after they ate them, they didn't look any bigger. And then he said, I woke up, but then I fell back asleep again. And this time I dreamt there was a corn stalk growing, and it had 7 healthy ears of corn on it. You know, normally a stalk will only have maybe 2, certainly not 7. But this healthy stalk had 7 ears of corn. But then he said, right after that, a withered stalk grew up, and it had withered corn and diseased corn on it, and it swallowed up all of the good corn. And he said, my magicians and my wise men, they can't interpret it. They don't have any understanding. And Joseph said, both your dreams mean the same thing. He said, the 7 healthy cows and the stalk with 7 healthy ears of corn, they mean 7 years of plenty in the land of Egypt. There's going to be 7 years when you have bumper crops. But he said the 7 sickly cows and that withered corn stalk represent 7 years of famine. A famine is when nothing grows. There's no water, no rain from heaven. The crops wither and die. So 7 good years and 7 years of famine. And then Joseph continued, and he said, so this is what the Pharaoh should do. You should appoint a wise man over all of Egypt, and he can appoint supervisors, and during those 7 years, collect 1/5 of the grain and store it in your storehouses, so that when those 7 years of famine come, there will be food for everybody in Egypt. Well, the Pharaoh looked around, and he said to his wise men, he said, is there anybody wiser than this man right in front of me, Joseph? He interpreted my dreams. He's got a good plan. He said to Joseph, I'm going to put you in charge of all of Egypt. There will be nobody higher than you, than myself. And so he gave Joseph his signet ring. He gave him linen clothes, a gold chain to put around his neck. He gave him an Egyptian name, and he even gave him a wife. And he gave him his chariot to ride around in. And Joseph was to ride around in this chariot. It was only for the second in command in Egypt. And everywhere he rode, the command was given, kneel down, kneel down. I mean, Joseph overnight had gone from being in prison to being in charge of all of Egypt. That was God's doing. It was God's time. It was the right time. Now, just as Joseph had said, there were 7 years of bumper crops. This is just one crop of corn, but you see how healthy it is? There was crops of wheat, crops of barley, crops of sugarcane. And just as Joseph instructed, they all collected the grain, they brought it into these bins, but you know, there was so much. I mean, they're recording how much grain was coming in, but there was so much grain that they just had to stop keeping track. There was so much. Now, during those 7 years, Joseph had 2 sons, and his first one he called Manasseh. You know, he gave them Hebrew names. You know, the Pharaoh had actually given Joseph an Egyptian name, a new name. But when he had sons, Joseph called them Hebrew names. The first son he called Manasseh, and that means God has made me forget my troubles, even my family troubles. And the second son, Ephraim, that means God has made me fruitful in the land of my trouble. God has really blessed Joseph. Now, right after those 7 years of bumper crops came 7 years of famine. You can see how that corn is just withered. It's so dry, there's no rain, there is suddenly no food. But the people came to Joseph, and Joseph distributed the food to the Egyptians. There was food for everybody. But you know, the famine wasn't just in Egypt, it was widespread. It was all over. And so other countries began to come, and they'd say to the Pharaoh, they want grain. And Pharaoh would say, go see Joseph, he's in charge, he's the one. Well, you know, in Canaan, where Jacob is living, the famine was there too. And Jacob looked around at his sons and he said, what are you doing standing here just looking around? He said, I've heard that there's grain in Egypt, and you need to go down there and get some, otherwise we're going to starve to death. So the 10 brothers went, but you know, Jacob wouldn't let Benjamin, his youngest son and brother of Joseph, go because he was afraid something might happen to Benjamin. So Benjamin stayed home and the 10 brothers went. Now, of course, when they got to Egypt, they had to go see Joseph because he was in charge. And you know, Joseph recognized them instantly, but they did not recognize Joseph because, you know, Joseph was dressed like an Egyptian. In fact, Egyptian royalty, he would have looked like a pharaoh. And he also spoke Egyptian. And so he used an interpreter. Deliberately, he did not speak Hebrew because he knew they didn't recognize him. And he said, where are you from? And they said, we're from Canaan, and we've come to buy grain. And Joseph said, no, you're not. You're spies. They said, no, my lord, we're not spies. We've come to buy grain for our family. We're actually all brothers, 10 of us. Actually, there were 12 of us. Our youngest brother is at home, and our other brother, well, he is no more. And so we've come to buy grain. And Joseph said, no, you're spies. But they insisted that, you know, they weren't spies. And they were bowing down to him and pleading with him. And you know, that's when Joseph, he remembered his own dreams. Remember that dream he had about being out in the field and his stock stood up and all the others bowed down? That was happening right now. His brothers were bowing down to him. Remember the other dream he had too, the same kind of dream with the stars. They're all bowing down to him. Well, Joseph said, I don't believe you. And, you know, I'm going to put you in jail until I figure out what to do. Well, they all went to jail for 3 days. And then they came out, and Joseph said, this is what you need to do if you want to live. You need to go back home and bring me back your youngest brother. I'll send grain home with you. But I'm going to keep Simeon here in jail, just as, you know, an assurance, so that I know if you're telling the truth, you'll bring back your youngest brother. Well, they were just sick. Like, they thought, what are we going to do? And they turned to talk to each other, and they were talking in Hebrew. They didn't think Joseph could understand them, but he could. And they said to each other, God is punishing us for what we did to Joseph. Remember, we didn't listen to Joseph when he pleaded for his life, And then Reuben said, I told you not to sin against Joseph, and you wouldn't listen to me, and now we're all having to pay for this. God is punishing us. They didn't think Joseph could understand, but Joseph could understand what they were saying, and he was overcome with emotion, and he turned away. And then when he composed himself, he turned back, and he said, I've given instructions to have your sacks packed full of grain, and I'll give you extra provisions, but I'm keeping Simeon, and you have to bring your youngest brother back here if you want to buy more grain and if you want to see Simeon again. Well, they had no choice. They agreed, and they took their sacks. But you know, Joseph had given secret instructions to his servant, and he had said, in their bags, I want you to return the money that they have paid for it. I want you to put their bags of money at the top of their sacks. Well, Joseph's brothers left. And you know, they had to stop for the night because it was a long way back to Canaan. And one of them opened his sack in order to get some grain for his donkey. And he was so startled because when he opened his sack, his money was right on top. And he was frightened, and he said, hey, look, my money's been returned in my sack. And their hearts just fell. They thought, what is happening? What is God doing to us? What are we supposed to do? Well, when they got back to Canaan, they told Jacob everything. They told him the whole truth of what had happened. And they said, we have to bring Benjamin back with us because Simeon's in jail, and this is what he said we have to do. Jacob said, I am not sending Benjamin back with you. He is not going. Well, you know, when the men opened up their sacks, all of the money had been returned. Every bag of money was in every sack, and they were terrified. Even Jacob was terrified. They were so confused. They said, what is happening? And the brothers said, we have to go back. We have to take Benjamin back with us. Jacob said, no, I am not sending Benjamin back. Well, you know, in today's story, we can see that God is with us all the time. He's powerful, and his timing is what matters. And no matter how we think things are just going so wrong, and when is it going to be over, and when is it going to be time, we just need to trust God, and in his time he will make everything right. See you next time.